So here we are with John Kirk and Rob Kennedy here in the Kennedy Report. We're here to tell a little bit of a story of what happened to John today. We were supposed to just do some medical research background with John. John's done a lot of research on his own and he's found a lot of facts out that I think the public and the Canadian citizens today need to know. And I think this will help people to be able to stand up and to understand what we are going through, I would say, right, John?
Oh, exactly.
So John had this afternoon a little interaction with the police. I think it was a positive interaction. I think John could tell a bit of his story and elaborate on it. And I think it'd be a good thing here. John?
Yeah, well, today I'm making a spaghetti sauce, and I actually needed some ingredients like mushrooms and green peppers, so I thought I'd better go to 108 and pick up some vegetables to continue on cooking. And while I was going into the 108, where I go quite a bit, it's fairly close, I noticed an old gentleman walking in, and he seemed to be struggling a bit with breathing, and he was quite old, and I just said, "Excuse me, sir, but that mask is blocking your breathing. You should probably consider maybe taking it down so you could breathe more freely." And when I was in near the store, the girl said, swarmed me like mosquitoes, actually, about three of them, and says, "You can't talk to our customers like that. You know, you have to leave right now." And I said, "Well, no, actually, I don't. I've got some shopping to do." And they started to get very agitated and said, "You know, you have to leave." And I said, "I know the manager, JP, quite well. He's a very nice guy. And he was actually a witness to my going to the city because I was suffering from what was severe mercury poisoning, where my weight went from 225 pounds to 160 pounds.
And this is where you get your medical research that you've done, right?
Well, I didn't have I didn't know what was wrong with me there. I was prepared to die. I thought, you know, I've been through a lot. Maybe it's just my time. And my boss, luckily at work, phoned me and says, "John, how's it going?" I said, "Much worse, Kevin. I'm probably not going to make it." He goes, "Well, then go to Victoria and see Dr. Yam. He's an expert and he's got a big laboratory and he'll be able to find out what's wrong with you, no problem." So I gathered all my strength. I made the drive to the ferries, of course, went across, drove up to Victoria and saw Dr. Yam. He spent about an hour with me. Told me to go away for a couple hours for lunch and came back, and he went through the whole works, and he, "John, your body is completely covered in mercury poisoning." I said, "Well, how's that possible? I don't even eat seafood, really." And he said, "It's from your dental fillings." I go, "My dental fillings?" He goes, "Yeah, you got mercury fillings. And over time, it's leached into your body, and now you're saturated with it in your brain, in your cells, everything."
So this has brought you to a point of that you're able to research the medical and learn things, right?
Well, my medical research came from before that, Rob.
Yeah.
I had a liver transplant in 1995, and beforehand, in order to stay alive, because I had what's called ascites, and my stomach distended so much I could hardly breathe, it was crushing my lungs. So I went online, again, I always like to research, I don't believe, I don't watch TV per se, and I went online, and it said the best thing to do when you're having ailments is to explore Gerson therapy. Now, for brevity, I'm not going to say anything other than Gerson therapy saved me.
Right.
It got my stomach back down to the point where my lungs weren't being crushed and I was able to breathe. And that got me through to the transplant that I got in February of '95. So that was the first example of my saving myself.
And learning medical terms.
Learning medical terms and what have you. And just getting into a mode of understanding medical from how it affects me.
So today then was...
No, could I just go to the next one?
Sure, yeah.
I found out that I had heart problems, and it was atherosclerosis and arrhythmia. And so I started doing my own research, and what they wanted to do was spike me with pills and give me pills, and I just felt there was something wrong with that. I took the pills for a while, but they didn't seem to make me better, and they made me a little not clear-headed. So I did a lot of research and found the best way to treat heart ailments is naturally. It's basically unblock the arteries and go through all the steps I did. Again, that's another situation, but go through all the steps you have to do to get your heart back and working. And so I did, and I no longer needed to take heart medications. So that's the second time where I really did my own research in order to stay alive and not rely on the medical system.
So this has brought you with some medical knowledge, and it has taught you to be able to research medical information, get the truth out there. You've healed yourself. You've done a great job. You're a healthy man. You're very physically fit today. You're very on the go. So all these elements that you've had, it's really shown that you've done a good work. So, I mean, this is believable stuff that you're able to talk about.
Well documented.
Well documented.
Well documented.
So, with that knowledge, I mean, today you ran into the old fellow. You just wanted to help him out, and you were swarmed.
I said, you need to breathe free. I said, God gave us a mouth for a reason. That's to be able to breathe in His air and breathe it out. And he didn't want to hear it, and I just realized that. But then all of a sudden, 3 girls from the 108 supermarket surrounded me and says, "You can't talk to our customers like that, and you have to leave right now." And I said, "No, I'm not leaving. I'm doing my shopping, and then I'm going to check out."
This is where we see fear really. It's kept going by people really pushing the narrative of what the government has, and you know, I've said to other pastors and other people in the community that God, our Lord Jesus, has never ever told us to follow a lie, and we need to stand up. We need to realize that people like John that are in the community that have some medical knowledge, done some extensive research, and know what he's talking about. It's important. Don't you think, John? It's important.
I'd be dead right now.
He
Guaranteed,
so,
I would not have made it if I didn't. With the mercury poisoning, I was down to 160 pounds and I couldn't get my head off the couch.
Why don't you elaborate on a little bit of what you learned about the vaccines?
What I've learned about vaccines is we have to stop calling them vaccines. What they are is they're medical devices. They're listed as such. And what they are is they're nanoparticulates that are meant to take down our immune system and supplant it with spike proteins. Those spike proteins that go into our body are actually set our cells up to become pathogen generators. And they actually will make people sicker and sicker and sicker, which is great for the medical community because they get to sell more pills until the people drop dead.
And isn't it true that you're worried about, as many people are learning, that this so-called vaccine or medical treatment
Operating system, nanoparticles.
We're learning today. You've given me a great, a lot of information from the internet that teaches us that we're actually injecting poison into our system.
Deadly poison. If people were to look at the actual numbers of people that are dying right after, I mean, not only that, blood clots and hemorrhaging and just falling down dead. They say on VAERS, VAERS, which tracks the damages, only 1% of the problems are being reported. So we know it's a lot more than that. And so what I would say to anybody with half a brain is before you allow anyone to inject something into your body, do your research. Otherwise, you may end up getting something that you regret.
And John, aren't you willing to help with this? If people are willing to contact you by email or call you, you can give them information. You can direct.
I don't know if I'm qualified to do that legally, to be honest with you. But right. I certainly, if someone had a question, I'd like to point them in the right direction. I'm not the story.
Right.
The story is out there. I found the research myself, and I could point people in the direction of research. I can't say here's what to do because I'm not a medical professional. I only did what I had to do to save my own life.
But it is fair to say that you're compassionate to help people.
I love people. When I see children getting vaccinated at 2 years old, it breaks my heart. I spend a lot of time crying here alone.
So, with what happened with the RCMP today, coming up to your house, how did that go for you?
Well, it went very well because the gentleman that came up really was just wanting to know what was going on at the 108. And he came up very calmly. And he just said, "I'd just like to ask you what exactly transpired." And I went over exactly what I've just stated. And he said, well, the girls there aren't happy with you, but if you could talk to JP, who is the manager of that thing, and he says it's okay to come back, then it's okay to come back. Now, the thing about JP, I will say, is JP was the manager of the Canco gas station here, where I stopped every time I had to go to Vancouver to get the different supplements I needed to get rid of the mercury out of my system.
Right.
So he saw me go from 165 pounds back to 200 over a course of several months, based on the fact that I was treating myself and it was working. So, by the way, I should say this. When I phoned the liver transplant clinic and told them that I was laced with mercury toxicity and I wanted a biopsy from my liver's biopsies back when I had the transplant, The nurse screamed at me, "There's no such thing as mercury poisoning, and you can't have your biopsies," and hung up the phone. And that was while I was sitting with my doctor in Williams Lake.
Wow.
He was shocked too.
So the cops, the RCMP today really treated you fairly, was very compassionate, very
Total
understanding.
gentleman.
He advised you correctly.
He was more. I've heard horror stories about how some people across Canada are being treated by the police, and let me
Right.
say, in 100 Mile House, we're blessed. The gentleman was totally open-minded. He said he thought, quite frankly, that there's two sides to every story, and the one thing he was concerned about was the way I raised my voice to those girls. And I am French Canadian background. You know, my mom could raise her temper, and I can too, and that's a fault of my own. However, I do get passionate when it comes to little babies and people being
Right.
basically assaulted by.
So I would
Fake
say
science.
not to get the wrong message that John got his temper up and was very angry. John's heart is very for the people of this community and for the people of this country. It's important to understand that this is a touchy situation. We're all fighting for the freedom of each and every individual around this country. So I would say John's heart was more fervent and excited than to be called angry.
Oh, I'm not calling them losers for wearing masks
No,
or anything.
no,
I feel
no.
bad. I mean, especially if a person's a young person, 25 to 35, and they want to wear a mask, that's fine. We won't even go into what's in the masks
Yeah.
or what's in the nasal tests.
Well, all people have to do is research the mask, find out what's in them,
yeah,
research the vaccine, see the poison that's in it, and we're not calling it a vaccine. We're calling it
the operating system.
an operating system, a gene therapy system. Some people might call it, but it's important that this messages get out. We see terrible things happening. Ontario, the army is being mobilized now. We see army trucks and equipment in BC being moved around the province. We see some real bad decisions from judges, court cases that should be easily won through a constitutional grounds that are being made decisions on that don't make any sense. We need to start looking at how many churches are actually operating in the Caribou area that are inside and gathering together and preaching the true gospel. We know that there's other churches out there, and we don't want to criticize any. We know that some of the people aren't really up to a fight that we're in. But we don't want those people either criticizing the ones that are out there that are trying to get the truth out and speak about freedom. We had some great rallies in the last couple of weeks in BC, and these messages are beginning to pour out. We're seeing crowds and people rising up together, not in anger, not in trying to control other people, but just telling people, loving people, and getting that message out.
Well, I think an example of that is what happened in London. London, close to 1 million people marched in London. There was no
right.
word of it all in the media. Mainstream media didn't cover it. All they did was they had agent provocateurs attack the police in Hyde Park, and they made it look at these protesters attacking the police. So you can pretty well bet that if you're watching mainstream media, your mind is totally controlled. It has been stuffed into my mold, and you will do as you were told until the rights to you were
That's
sold.
right.
Frank Zappa.
So one last thing before we end this interview here. What do you have to say to the community, 100 Mile, the Caribou community, from basically, I guess, Prince George down to Cache Creek?
It's my fervent belief that people are wearing the masks right now, hoping that this story that started in January of last year, where 3 weeks to flatten the curve, where we're still, listening to that little demon Fauci talk about, we just need more time to get the curve down. There will never be a time when the curve goes down when they control the numbers. So what I would say to people is do your own research. Get online. If you have your head stuck in a cable, if you watch cable TV, there's a cable going right into your forehead and they are directing your thoughts. I'm just asking people to start directing your own thoughts because your children's lives, your lives, and the lives of the loved ones around you depend upon it.
And get out there, and you don't have to wear a mask all the time.
Or at all.
Or at all. I've never worn a mask. I've been in thousands and thousands of crowds of people. I've never gotten sick, and I'm still not sick. But I will tell you that freight from one coast to the other coast of this country, and from the Arctic down to our border, I will tell you that we need to live in freedom, not in tyranny. And this has been the Kennedy Report, and this is Faith Questions Tyranny. And if you want to visit us, you just punch in FQT News or faithquestionstyranny.com and FQTnetwork.com and FQTnews.com. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob, for doing a great job for the
Thank
community.
you, John. Been a pleasure.
Hey,
I know
buddy.
I'm holding the camera.
Can't
but-
wait to see how it turns out.